Picture the scene, a luxurious office, steeped in silence, broken only by the sharp click of a safe being unlocked. Leonardo Vasconcellos, one of the wealthiest men in the country, is there alone, determined to toss out his entire past, documents, papers, memories he's sure he no longer needs. But suddenly, among old receipts and folders, something unexpected appears, a crumpled, almost faded photo. In it, a thin street girl with messy hair holds a slip of paper with his name. Look for Leonardo Vasconcellos. He is your only family. What is this girl? Her eyes desperate, like someone who's seen too much, doing with a message so bluntly directed at him. Who is Sofia? How did this photo end up hidden among the millionaire's own secrets? In that instant, everything stops. The ground drops out beneath Leonardo. He realizes, either he ignores this forever, or his life is about to change. What would you do if you found a plea like that, surfacing from the last place you'd ever expect? Stay with me, because what comes next is simply impossible to ignore. It had been raining for hours, slow, thin lines streaking the window, as if time itself outside had stalled to match Leonardo's aches. The apartment was a void full of echoes, just the distant tick of a clock, a faint drone of traffic from far below, and, once in a while, the muffled crack of thunder. Leonardo walked the corridor like a ghost, jacket hanging heavy from his shoulder, shirt wrinkled the way it gets after too much work and too little sleep. He carried a box of old files and a cup of cold coffee, barely touched. In the deepest room, hidden behind a wall of books, was the old safe. An enormous machine from another era, dark, almost featureless except for a few scratches and faded gilt work near the lock. Leonardo had always avoided it. That safe was a leftover from a past he'd sworn he'd left behind. But today, under that gray sky and the weight of an odd sort of week, he'd decided to face it. He took his key ring from his pocket, searching unhurriedly until he found the tiny, almost rusty, golden one. He fitted it into the lock, turned, strained against the latch. The safe, packed with old memories, seemed unwilling to open easily. When it finally gave, the smell was one of old paper, dust, and something bitter, maybe fear, maybe regret, mingling for years. Leonardo pulled out the first stack of documents. Pages from decades ago, contracts, certificates, letters from people he could barely remember. A crumpled envelope, dated 20 years back, fell to the floor. He ignored it. More folders came out, flicked through in passing. With every page, he sighed, a heavy, impatient sound, as if he just wanted it all over with. The lamp's yellow glow stretched the shadows across the room. Leonardo rubbed his eyes. His face, usually hard-edged, seemed different that afternoon, less arrogant, more tired. His mouth was drawn into a tight line, and sometimes his brow would crease for no reason. Maybe old memories were nudging him awake. All at once, almost without realizing, he pulled a photo from a thin envelope he didn't even recall putting there. The instant he saw it, his breath caught. A regular old photograph, edges worn, colors faded. But what was in it? His heart flinched, a jolt lengthening the silence in the room. But, he whispered, his voice barely there, tilting his head. In the picture, a child's face. A young girl, small and thin, dark hair wild with grime and rain, eyes impossibly big and direct, staring right through the paper. Behind her, just another street, blurred, indistinct. Only she was real, right in the center. But there was something in her gaze. A deep sadness, but also strength. A flicker of hope that shouldn't exist there, between dirt and fear. Leonardo froze. His neck stiffened, his fingers clenched the photo's edge. The cracked leather of the armchair creaked as he slumped down, stunned. He turned the photo over, blank. He tapped it a few times, adrift. His mind drifted, too. Who was that girl? How had this photo ended up here, among deeds and bills and legal notices? Why did her face seem so familiar? For some reason, the silence now felt thicker, bubbling with questions. Leonardo started to sweat, a cold, uncomfortable sweat. His heartbeat was hard out of rhythm. Impossible, he thought. He tried to search his memory for some moment, some tie, but only a void came up. Just a vague sense that this little girl, with dirty skin and watery eyes, had once been a part of something of his. Or so it felt. He glanced aside, as if expecting someone to materialize and solve the puzzle for him. But the room remained mute. Outside, more thunder answered. Leonardo braced his elbows on his knees, the photo still clutched in his hands. His face was a mix of shock and something else. An old ache, buried deep. Suddenly, his legs wobbled. For a moment, he remembered his childhood, his younger sister, their silly fights, laughter lost too soon. All his life, he tried to forget, to bury it under paperwork. Now, all at once, it stared back at him from the girl's eyes. So much like, he didn't even want to say it aloud. He took a deep breath, trying to collect himself. He barely moved, just flicking his gaze from the photo to the open safe, as if answers were hidden there. Deep down, it was fear. Fear of what it meant. Fear of another ghost coming to unravel everything he'd built. The rain intensified, now hammering on the glass. Leonardo let the photo fall onto his lap and ran a hand down his face, as if trying to shake off a bad dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was real. That image, the eyes, those tiny hands grasping something he couldn't make out, was what hurt most. There was a truth clenched tight, held in silence. It was as though the world's noise paused completely as he gazed at the photo again, slower this time. He noticed details, the ripped sleeve of her dress, dirt under her fingernails, the scab on her knee. But most of all, that look, pleading for help, yet already resigned to being alone. Leonardo stood, slowly, as if the weight of years had fallen all at once across his shoulders. He walked to the window, the photo gripped between his fingers, his gaze lost on the city. Only after a long while did he whisper to himself, voice rough, "Who are you? What do I have to do with this?" There, in the room's solitude, with the world outside scrubbing pain away in the rain, Leonardo's life was shifting, and he didn't even know it yet. The photo was small, its edges creased, one corner water-stained as if it had been caught in a downpour. The girl's face, there wasn't the kind you forget. You know those looks that you see once, but they haunt you everywhere? Wide, frightened, shimmering wet, as if she'd just been crying and paused only because someone got in her way. Chapped lips, thin matted hair stuck to her forehead. Her hand clutching a slip of paper that looked like it might disintegrate in the next gust of wind. Leonardo tried to make sense of it. At first, he figured it must be a mistake, a staff member's cruel prank, but the note was there, and he couldn't argue with what it said. He read it, afraid to get it wrong, sounding out each word. Look for Leonardo Vasconcellos. He is your only family. His own name, right there. He recognized the surname even before the letters became a word. Documents, contracts, stacks of statements, all became static. For a few seconds, the office lost its meaning. All he could hear, faintly, was the rain pounding the thick glass, the muffled traffic murmurs from the street below. His tie felt tighter on his neck. That cold sweat rose up his whole body, just from thinking none of it made any sense. And yet, it made all the sense in the world for a man who'd spent his life running from the past. Leonardo's hand trembled. He couldn't bring himself to put the photo down. He studied the girl in the photo, desperate to find a flaw, a tell, any sign it was fake. But that emptiness in her face, it was all too real. You could barely see her teeth, her mouth pulled awkward, maybe from hunger, maybe shame. Hope and fear blurred in her gaze. It felt, impossibly, like she was there, right now, begging him alone for help, no one else in the world. A voiceless plea. Please, listen to me, don't turn your back too. A lump formed in Leonardo's throat, heavy, bending him forward, breath shallow as he tried to swallow. He remembered old newspapers, or photos, people fleeing. But this girl wasn't fleeing bombs. She was running from cold, from abandonment. And somehow, her pain pierced the thick wall he'd built inside his chest so many years ago. He thought of all the times he'd tried to forget he had family, blood, a story, telling himself that a life without ties hurt less, because then when you lost, there was nothing to miss. But his name, handwritten on that half-rotted slip of paper, tore open raw memories. That handwriting belonged to someone desperate, yet hopeful, like tossing a last coin into a deep well and praying for a miracle. And what if it was true? Whoever wrote this knew more than he did. Or, if it wasn't, why leave such an obvious clue? Panic started to take him, but Leonardo made himself stare at the photo, decoding every detail. The sweat beaded on the girl's brow, her small hand clamped so tight on the note, dirty fingers, bitten nails, as if she knew nothing of gentle touch, only survival. In the background of the photo, you could see wet asphalt, little droplets sparkling under a broken street lamp. Piles of trash, pieces of cardboard and plastic. A setting far too cold for a child. It was night, or maybe dusk, it was hard to tell. But that look in her eyes hurt like nothing else. That look that still believes, even after life's already hit harder than any adult could bear. Leonardo let the photo drop to the desk, then snatched it back up almost apologetically. He felt small, as if someone had sliced open an old wound for everyone to see. He racked his brain to remember if he'd seen this girl before, but she wasn't familiar. Yet something, maybe the shape of her eyes, her brow, the sad way she pressed her lips, reminded him powerfully of someone. A déjà vu so raw it almost made him sick. The old clock in the corner ticked on, measuring a time that, for him, had stopped. He remembered the vows he'd made never to lose control again, never to let his guard down. Here he was now, in a perfect suit, heart undone by a battered photo, a note that left no questions, just a reckoning. His throat closed up. It wasn't just fear of being tricked, someone trying to get money from him with a scam. It was another fear, the fear he'd failed someone of his own blood. That somewhere out in this cruel world there was a child, lost among the vicious, waiting for help that never came. That in all his fortune, all those expensive, soulless things, maybe the only thing missing was a gesture, to take care of his own. The city's lights shimmered faintly through the window's cracks, reflected softly on the safe's open door. The smell of old paper, mixed with that cold humidity. The photo felt like it was demanding an answer. Leonardo closed his eyes, holding his breath, feeling it all at once. Longing, fear, guilt, a wish to vanish. But deep down he knew, there was no turning back. The past sometimes demands a high price. The girl in the photo kept looking at him, her eyes asking, waiting. It was impossible not to feel the weight. This wasn't just a memory. It was a summons, a call so real that no skepticism could truly silence it. The rain's noise outside only made the office's silence thicker. And among all the worthless papers, only that photo felt like it meant anything. Leonardo hesitated for a heartbeat, then slipped the photo in his jacket pocket, the words from the note pulsing in his chest. Look for Leonardo Vasconcellos. He is your only family. For the first time in a long while, he felt seen. And suddenly, alone, in a way you can only feel when you find your own pain reflected in the face of a forgotten child. Shut away in his office, Leonardo heard only the rain beating the window. The digital clock blinked red on the corner of the desk, but he had no sense of how long he'd been there. Maybe minutes, maybe a lifetime. He was still holding the photo, staring at that little girl. And she stared back, even through the paper. There was something in her expression that made it hard for him to breathe. Her eyes, enormous, shining with tears, full of fear. The way she clutched the note, as if it were the one thing in the world left to save somebody. Leonardo began to tremble, closing his eyes, but only for a second. A memory bubbled up. His sister, Marina, smiling girl, a little stubborn, vanished into a childhood that felt like it belonged to someone else. He tried to push it away, but couldn't. He remembered her running barefoot across the farm's yard, happiness that no longer existed. And he remembered the silence that settled after, how hard it became even to speak of her. Their father never uttered her name again. No one did. Only the absence remained, the empty chair at family holidays. Everyone looked everywhere, but at that space she'd left behind. Now the photo in his hand, the trembling script on the note. Look for Leonardo Vasconcellos. He is your only family. He tried to laugh, a nervous scoff. Family? Him? He hadn't even had patience for himself in recent years. He never had kids, dodged family gatherings to avoid questions. Work, numbers, money were always easier. And now the photo. A girl who could have just been another sad story from the city. But why him? And why his name, clear as day, on a note barely holding together? A cold fear rose in his chest, sharper than shame. Was it a trap? Blackmail? Some new scam? He'd seen them all. His mind raced. He opened and closed drawers. Even the keyboard seemed too loud. But inside, something different gnawed at him. What if it's not a scam? What if it's true? What if this girl existed because someone made a mistake, forgot, ignored? What if his sister had known a secret he'd never learned? Something left behind that locked door of the past. He sat, eyes fixed, scanning every inch of the photo. Her coat was too big, the sleeve swallowed her hand. Her face was dirty. Her hair, brown and badly cut, the kind of hair no one bothers to comb before sending a child outside. The more he looked, the tighter his chest became. The shape of her nose, the line of her brow. It was like Marina, but thinner, more battered and spent. He caught himself wondering, had this girl ever heard a bedtime story? Had she ever been called darling by anyone? Or had she only ever heard yelling and threats? The office was thick with the must of old paper and expensive furniture. A strange loneliness pressed down on him. The house was big, but suddenly felt small, confining. Every corner echoed with his name, as if everyone was waiting for an answer he never wanted to give. The urge to toss the photo and note in the fireplace surged, fierce, like maybe he could burn away all the weight by destroying it. But his fingers still clutched it, sweating. He knew there was no point in making excuses. It was there for him to deal with. And what if it was true? What if the girl was his own blood, a thread of his sister he'd let slip away forever? Leonardo stood, took 2 steps, sat down again. He stared out the window, seeing the city smeared in rain. He imagined the girl out there somewhere, in weather like this, nowhere to sleep, cold, stomach rumbling, waiting for a miracle or for someone who never came. Why was this burden dumped on him? He never asked to be anyone's hope. But there was no use. He'd been chosen, somehow, to finally stop ignoring it. Doubt gnawed from within. Had Marina left a child and never told him? Did his family have a missing branch he'd refused to see? And what if the woman who wrote the note truly knew something, a friend of his sister, or some distant relative? Had it all this time? While he fought for profits and deals, someone was needing him, waiting out there on the street, with hunger and courage crowding the same small face. He breathed deeply, a thing he hadn't done in years. Tried to think rationally, make a list, act the executive, scam or real. Then he looked at the girl again. Nothing in her eyes said blackmail. Just fear, hope, a silent plea. Come get me. Do it different from everyone else. Time ticked on, but Leonardo barely noticed. The house darkened, streetlights slashing lines across the wall. He remembered all those times he'd pretended not to see kids begging outside the company building. How much he resented them trying to wash his car windshield, because he didn't want to remember how unfair the world was, even to children. Now, for the first time in years, he felt ashamed for who he was. All his power meant nothing here, alone, while maybe someone waited, hoping for a single gesture, a look in return. The photo slipped from his grasp onto his lap. Leonardo didn't cry, but the lump in his throat was one only Marina could understand. And he realized, finally, some secrets leave us no peace until the truth comes out. And no matter the fear, no matter the cost, the only answer is to face it, or spend a lifetime running from your own blood. The silence of the office felt different from every other day. Not the usual hush, only broken by distant machinery or the low buzz of air conditioning. It was as if the furniture itself waited, watching Leonardo sit there, the photo's envelope poised atop the stack for the shredder. He looked at the photo again. The hand that could sign million-dollar deals now faltered. The girl's eyes cut through the paper, asking for help without a word. Her eyes were deep, that blend of fear and stubborn hope. And the note, those crooked words, stuck to her as her last defense. Leonardo closed his eyes for an instant, but saw her image even clearer. He tried to convince himself it was senseless to waste time on this. He nearly pushed the photo toward the edge of the desk, with all the other papers destined for destruction. Years of being cold, methodical, leaving the past behind. But that day, the past came creeping back, grabbing at his heel like a cold hand. Out on the street, the rain tapped at the glass, arrhythmic but heavy with every drop. The gloom made the office feel even tighter. Leonardo rubbed his face, felt stubble growing in, the wear of sleepless nights pressed into his chest. He picked up the photo once more. Anger sparked at himself for being rattled by this. A battered photo, an unknown child, a rushed phrase written on yellowed paper. His name, unmissable. But who had done this? Who'd left this clue in the safe? His finger trembled, almost imperceptibly, for a heartbeat. He thought about tearing the photo in two, stuffing it with the rest, hitting the shredder. It would have been easy, like every time he'd erased any threat to his routine. But something was different this time, something sticky at the core, a stain he couldn't wash out. A strange knot twisted in his stomach. He remembered his sister's face, overlaying the girl's. Some detail, the shape of the chin, the sorrow in the eyes. For a moment, he could swear he was looking at Marina, small, the way she'd once been. Leonardo bowed his head, breathing deep. The scent of old paper and polished wood weighed heavy. The clock ticked, slow, as he wavered. His gaze darted from the photo to the shredder, then to the window, searching for a decision in all the wrong places. He stood, walked toward the trash, gripping the photo tighter than he cared to admit. But he couldn't let go. His arm even shook. The girl's face, the words on the note. Look for Leonardo Vasconcellos. He is your only family. The words clung to him, beating like an unspoken truth. He went back to the desk, slumped into the chair, hands pressing together, a sigh barely escaping his teeth. He opened the drawer with his phone, reached in, fumbling, until he found it. He stared at the blank screen, his reflection warped in the glass. Hesitated before unlocking. What was he looking for, really? Was there anyone to ask? Did he even want to know? Deep down, he was terrified. Afraid to open a door that would never close again. Afraid the truth might be worse than any lie. Afraid that, at some time, someone needed him as desperately as he once needed someone. And he failed. The rain hammered harder now. From the window, drops ran slowly, drawing long streaks on the glass. Cars passed below, muffled engines, scattered horns. It all felt far away, so different from the room where silence just grew. Suddenly, Leonardo held the photo in both hands. He traced his thumb along the scrap of the note. His eyes filled with water, but he swallowed any sign of emotion, only clutching the photo tighter. For whatever reason, he still couldn't see himself as someone who could cry. He tried to rationalize, listing reasons to just ignore it all. Thought of blackmail, a setup, someone looking for quick money. That made sense. It had always been that way. But even so, the doubt came back stronger. What if it was none of that? What if this girl was truly connected to him? The decision started growing inside him like a coal, quiet but burning. He finally picked up the phone and dialed an old contact, someone who'd handled documents for him before, a discreet, trustworthy guy. He waited, thumb hovering before making the call. His chest rose and fell, tense as if about to plunge into icy water. He looked once more at the photo. Now he didn't just see the girl's misery, but a shame stuck to himself, for having perhaps been too indifferent, too busy. At last, he found what little courage he had left. Called the contact. The voice that answered was low, attentive. Leonardo didn't explain everything, just said he needed information about a child, asked what methods might trace the photo and that note. He spoke quickly, afraid to think too much and back out. When the call ended, he felt no relief, just a knot in his gut. Now he was certain he wouldn't be able to sleep, couldn't work, couldn't breathe easy until he discovered who that girl was, and how she wound up tangled in his story. Time stretched thin, the office heavier with every sound. He looked at the photo again. Their eyes met, separated by decades, by secrets and old papers. For the first time in years, Leonardo felt something close to hope and fear, all swirling together, frightening and inevitable. A small step, almost invisible, but the start of a road with no return. The rain had stopped about 2 hours ago, but the streets were still shining, full of puddles reflecting the car's headlights. The strong smell of wet asphalt hung heavy, mixed with that stale odor that always lingers over the city's forgotten alleys. Leonardo felt out of place here. Even before getting out of the car, he let out a slow sigh, resting his arm on the steering wheel. He ran a hand over his face, trying to hide his nerves, but only managed to feel his skin cold. His hands wouldn't stop trembling, if only slightly. All he wanted was to turn around and disappear from this place. But the girl's photo kept pushing itself into his mind. Her eyes, in that scrap of paper, seemed more real than any number in the reports he reviewed every day. The detective arrived quietly, slipping into the passenger seat with a brief nod. Leonardo only knew the man through an old friend's recommendation, the kind who didn't ask too many questions, but didn't promise miracles either. The air in the car grew denser. The detective examined the picture carefully, rubbing his thumb along the worn edges. "Is this recent?" he asked, not looking at Leonardo. He shook his head, shoulders slumping. "I have no idea. I just need to know if she's alive. If she's here." They walked together, each moving at the pace guilt would allow. The detective was straightforward, speaking only when necessary. Leonardo barely spoke at all. He just watched. He looked at the darkened buildings, the blankets bunched up on the sidewalks, the little heaps of trash that sometimes hit a curled-up body, a wary glance, or just resignation. Some people quietly begged for money, their voices barely above a whisper. Others didn't even look up. Children darted by, laughing loud, running from some invisible threat, and Leonardo found himself feeling a bitter sort of envy. When had he last felt anything close to freedom? The cold bit into everything. The tips of his gloved fingers, his neck wrapped in an expensive wool scarf, the fear that seemed to grow from the inside out. He felt ridiculously hidden inside his overcoat, as if he were trying to shield himself from the world itself, not just the weather. No matter how much he wanted to blend in with the others, it was impossible to ignore. The heavy watch on his wrist gleamed too brightly. Even his gait seemed to draw attention. On every corner, Leonardo searched for faces. He tried to spot the girl, small, skinny, hair tangled, probably dirty with earth and time. Her eyes, in the photograph, always came to him first, wanting to trust, even while knowing the risk. Sometimes he stopped and let the detective speak with someone more at home on the cold pavement than he would ever be. The detective showed the photo, dropped his tone, and heard short stories, clipped answers, suspicious glances. Packs of children came to beg for food, to rummage through bags, arguing over some invisible prize. None of them was Sofia. A dealer in one of the alleys, in a torn t-shirt and a laugh emptied of joy, eyed Leonardo from head to toe. Silence thickened even more. Leonardo tried to shrink himself, feeling even more out of place, but the detective held firm. "We just want to know about this girl here. No one's looking for trouble." The man glanced at the photo again, whistled low, gestured to a street kid. The reply was brief. No, they'd never seen her. But the surname, Vasconcellos, floated out quietly, almost a whisper. The detective grabbed Leonardo's hand and discreetly pulled him away. "The more you hang around here, the more you stand out," he said, his voice dry but not harsh. Leonardo nodded, just a small gesture, feeling a mix of shame and fear he couldn't name. Around a darker corner, near the entrance to a ramshackle tenement, a swarm of kids played with bottle caps. A toothless, grinning little boy slipped his hand into the detective's pocket, dashed off, and shouted, "If you want to see the girls, they hang out by the overpass, sir." The detective laughed, fished a coin from his pocket, tossed it behind him. For the first time that night, Leonardo managed a slight, sideways smile, a crooked hope that maybe someone might actually help. They passed a skinny dog rummaging through trash bags, growling softly to defend a scrap of fried chicken. Leonardo looked away, fighting nausea. How does anyone survive like this? He thought, tears threatening but not falling. He never liked crying, not even when he lost his own family. His silence said it all. Further ahead, by an abandoned construction site, the detective stopped and called over a bent old woman selling candy on the corner. She took her time peering at the photo before answering. "There is a girl that looks like her. She comes by now and then, but vanishes quickly, always wary," she said with a tired voice. "Lives with some street kids, carries a piece of paper in her pocket, won't let anyone see it. Folks say her mother died last year." Leonardo opened his mouth to ask, his voice barely a whisper. "Sofia?" The lady had no doubt. Nobody knows her name. But the eyes sad, you know. Scared, but scrappy too. The detective thanked her, bought a sweet, and handed it to a skinny little girl who smiled shyly. Leonardo felt that every face here was a silent plea for help. They stopped at the end of the overpass, near a makeshift fire. Children huddled together, some sleeping, others awake, all guarding each other. Leonardo stood there, hands stuffed in his pockets, scanning each one. None had the right face. But somewhere among those little bodies, he knew. She could be hiding, watching him without him knowing. When they made it back to the car, Leonardo was exhausted, shaking from the cold even beneath his expensive coat. The detective looked at him, serious. "It's not easy, sir. Too many kids here. And sometimes, one night makes all the difference." Leonardo looked out the window, city lights blurred by raindrops. He was angry with himself. For the lost years, for all the chances he never gave anyone, not even himself. But now, the night felt less silent. The weight on his chest was still heavy, but something new had settled. He wasn't going to stop. No way was he going to forget those eyes. Nor the note. Nor Sofia. The car eased to a stop on the narrow street, the engine thrumming softly. But inside, it felt like Leonardo's heart was louder than any noise. He stared out the window, took a deep breath, straightened his coat. It wasn't just the cold. It was anxiety, that blend of fear, hope, and uncertainty twisting in his chest. Thin rain had been falling for hours. The smell of wet earth, garbage, and damp clothes clung to the air, sticking to hair and skin of anyone passing through. The dull yellow from a lamppost fought the darkness, giving everything a beige, washed-out hue, as if the world had lost its color in this part of the city. Leonardo stepped out, felt the sharp wind, and stood still, staring straight ahead. The children's voices echoed softly, but he knew this wasn't play. It was defense. It was fear of a grown-up getting close. He moved forward slowly, his expensive shoes soaking in a puddle he couldn't avoid. Each step weighed on him. Each memory of his sister, every silence of his empty life, each loss he never understood. By the alley's mouth, he paused, barely breathing. There, at the back of the shadowy corridor, were a few crates, some dirty tarps, cardboard. Among them, a group of children. Skinny, dirty, some coughing. Little ones, all of them. 6, maybe 7. They were bunched together, like a single frightened creature, clinging together. In the middle, almost swallowed up, was her. Sofia. Up close, she was even smaller than in the photo. A wisp of a child, hair plastered with rain and sweat, her pale skin grimy, eyes sunken. But something strong simmered in her. The way she looked straight at him, refusing to lower her head. That gaze, the same one from the photo. Only in real life, it was tougher and sadder. Her hands clutched an empty plastic grocery bag. She had nothing to share. Even so, the other kids pressed close, as if her silence gave them some sort of shelter. A boy with a black eye kept Leonardo in his sights, ready to leap, even if it meant losing. No one spoke. Only water dripping from rooftops, a distant car passing, a siren far away. And the silence, the heavy kind that seems to stick to your bones. He watched, they waited. Then, in a second, Sofia's eyes met his. Time stopped. I swear it did. The rest of the world vanished. Car, rain, cold. There was only that look. Surprise at first. The confusion of recognizing someone you've never met. The girl's face so much like someone from the past. It was impossible. The same shape of the eyes, the nose, even the little pout of her lips. Leonardo saw, without a doubt, his own sister when she was a girl. Same marks, same mix of fear and resilience. Leonardo's chest caved in. He felt that ache of longing, you know? The one that tightens your throat just remembering. The one you try to hide but can't, because it leaks from your eyes, dampens your skin, shakes in your voice. He couldn't say a word. Just stood there, staring, trying to decide whether this was real or one of those jumbled dreams that soak you in sweat. Sofia stiffened. She didn't cry, didn't smile, didn't run. She stared back with defiance, but you could see she was trembling too. He couldn't tell if it was from the cold or from fear. The wind picked up, sharper, and in a flash, he saw the whole weight of abandonment in this little girl. Feet cracked, clothes too thin for the winter rolling in, her face marked by time and the street. But beneath it all, the same glimmer of hope that never dies. He tried to move closer, took a step, sensed the group tighten around her. The children closed ranks tighter around Sofia. Cornered animals. They eyed each other, determined to protect her every way they could. The girl, as frail as she seemed, was like the queen of this tiny cardboard kingdom. Leonardo glanced at her hands, saw chewed nails, scarred skin. Little cuts, scars no one should have at her age. Everything about her showed how fiercely she had fought. What he didn't know was how to speak, how to break that ice. He thought of a line, tried to prepare his voice, but nothing came out. Just a lump in his throat. Just what eyes, no longer able to hide it. He'd come from money, from bank vaults, from a world of costly silence, and now faced a universe of kids who'd give anything just to smell a clean pillow. The boy with the black eye stepped forward, motioned something to Sofia, maybe warning her to run. But she stayed put. Met his gaze. It wasn't grown-up courage. It was the kind you get when you have nothing left to lose. She whispered, barely audible, "Are you Leonardo?" Hearing his name like that, it hit him like a punch. There was no doubt. You could tell. Real life is stronger than any old photo. He nodded slowly, speechless, only able to answer with the gesture. And there, in her eyes, something new sparked. It was still fear, of course, but mixed with curiosity, a scrap of almost invisible hope. So small, and she already knew what it meant to survive. Leonardo felt an enormous emptiness, as if he'd finally found everything that was lost, and, at the same time, realized just how much was broken between them. The rain didn't stop. The chill seeped into every corner. They stood there, face to face. Between them, only the wet street, the tragedy of two old stories, and the certainty that, from here on out, nothing would ever be quite the same for either of them. The wind was cold that morning. The sun couldn't open a gap through the thick, gray clouds. At the edge of the alley, you could faintly hear the rush of traffic, mingled with street voices, the kind that seemed not to notice you. But here, in the space between peeling walls and mounting trash, it was hard to think of anything but the brittle tension in the air. Leonardo stood still, holding his breath. He didn't know where to put his hands. He just wanted to get closer, but every step felt like stepping on glass. One wrong sound, and everything could shatter. Sofia was there, huddled tight, her grimy knees to her chest. Another, smaller boy was at her side, watching warily, and a girl with braids carrying the weight of the world in her eyes. But it was Sofia who wouldn't look away from him. Those eyes, they didn't only carry fear. There was something worse, the way she locked stares, tense, seeing danger everywhere. She looked ready to attack or bolt, like a wild animal, mistreated so often she didn't believe any good gesture from an adult anymore. Leonardo tried to crouch, bringing his face level with hers. He saw Sofia's nails chewed down, her fingers far too thin. She clutched a battered sack to her chest, as if it was the only thing she truly owned. He tried to smile, but realized his face no longer knew how. What came out was more a shadow of a smile than the real thing. Sofia, his voice barely made it out. She shrank back further, poking at the ground with her fingertips. The other two slid between her and Leonardo, protecting in silent ways that said everything. There was a different kind of respect here, a way of guarding yourself without having to shout. Leonardo thought to reach out, but stopped. He knew if he got any closer she'd slip away as suddenly as she'd appeared. That hurt him. Hurt to realize his presence was just one more thing to be afraid of. He felt crushing weight in his chest, as if he'd missed 1,000 chances to do things differently. Sofia raised her eyes again, but this time there was a flicker of anger. Suspicion tangled up with the urge to fight. Her front teeth were missing, her lips split from the cold. But her eyes, those were the eyes of someone who'd been hurt by this world but hadn't truly given up. Leonardo saw it in an instant, felt a wild urge to protect her, but also, a voice inside told him maybe he didn't even know how. The silence between them got heavier still. The girl's breathing was fast, like someone holding her breath, bracing for danger to pass. The whole time, watching his every move, ready to leap back at the first sign. Leonardo felt all this, deep. He tried to fumble in his pockets, but that made Sofia clutch her sack even tighter. She looked to her friends, one of them whispering something in her ear. It was impossible to catch, but it sounded like a warning against trust. Leonardo stopped, abandoning the search. No present, no money, nothing could break through that wall. Not right now. The ground was damp, reeking of mold and old food. The smell bothered Leonardo, but for them it was just normal. The cold was just another detail. And realizing this, a sadness washed over him. Not the ordinary kind, but the kind that aches inside, the hard sense of helplessness. He wondered, in that moment, if a man like him, with so much money and fame, could really help someone who'd already been through so much. Sofia's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. But she didn't cry. It was as if she'd learned to swallow her tears as a kid, because no grown-up had ever earned the right to see them. She bit the side of her finger, quick glances toward the alley's exit, weighing her chances of a getaway. Leonardo felt his face flush. He hadn't a clue what to say. The silence was broken only now and then by the distant blast of a horn or the sound of someone kicking a can in the street outside. It was limbo, a place where nothing was safe, not even a conversation. He could see Sofia was trembling, from the cold, but also from fear. Here, Fear had no one face. It was all the fears of a stolen childhood. Fear of beatings, of hunger, of being betrayed again. Fear of empty promises. Her eyes seemed to ask, "Are you just like the rest? Will you smile now, then vanish tomorrow?" And Leonardo there, in expensive clothes that clashed with this world, felt small. For the first time in years, he felt he might never really have understood the pain of someone so little and so scarred. He took a deep breath, and even without much courage to speak, managed only to whisper, "I came. I just want to understand. I want to know how I can." His voice faltered, faded to a whisper. But Sofia didn't reply. She stared down at her feet, the odd-laced, holy shoes. Maybe forming an answer felt like risking more than she was willing. The silence stretched on. Leonardo realized there was no formula, no money or right phrase. There was only time, and that, maybe, was the hardest thing to give. Because trust isn't built in a day. Not for someone raised never to hope for the best. The wind gusted again, lifting scraps of paper all around, as if nothing here was fixed. But in that sharp way, Leonardo understood that before he could save Sofia, maybe he'd have to learn from her first. Learn to wait. To prove, day by day, that he wasn't going to leave like all the others. And right then, he felt, with every fiber, the weight of everything he'd failed to do up until now. And, for the first time, Leonardo Vasconcellos, millionaire, master of everything, realized the hardest thing was opening his own heart. It started as a flash. A stranger, half-hidden, lifted a cell phone and snapped a photo, barely noticed. Sometimes in the city, a rumor can outrun the wind. That's how it was. An image, two faces, and someone dropped a comment in a journalist's WhatsApp group. That was all it took for everything to spiral out of control. The next day, there were people camped out on the building's sidewalk. First came 3 reporters, then more. From the apartment window, Leonardo looked down, eyes heavy, chin propped on the curtain, seeing camera flashes even in daylight. The constant sound of cars was normal here, but now there was the drone of voices. Who's the girl? Are you going to help her? Is this your family? Every question hit like a punch. It felt like the entire building squeezed the air around him, his breathing like he was climbing a hill. Poor Sofia barely left her room since the chaos began. Every honk or shout, you'd see her jump, even if she tried to pretend she wasn't listening, just doodling in her notebook. She sat cross-legged, pen digging into paper, but her eyes were off in the distance. Sometimes, thinking no one was watching, she'd bury her face between her knees, hiding. Underneath it was old fear, of adults, of loud noises, of being noticed too much. Leonardo was on the sofa. His tired eyes drifted from the phone to an article on the laptop, then to a pad of paper tossed onto the floor. Millionaire may be related to Street Child, the headline read. Below it, a picture of the two of them. He was in a suit at the back, trying to keep his distance, and in front, Sofia, hunched, arm half-hidden, eyes wary. The article was full of unanswered questions and heavy insinuations. Why would someone so powerful have anything to do with a dirty, lost kid? Was it blackmail? Was it a scam? Was it social responsibility to clean up his image? The phone rang nonstop. He switched it off. He didn't want to speak to anyone, friends, employees, no one. Even the building manager called, asking if he could keep the delivery entrance clear, considering the commotion. Sofia caught it all, even silently. That kid was already skilled at reading a room, knowing where danger came from, when to be ready to run. She saw the parade of shoes on the staircase under the door crack, heard unfamiliar voices asking about her, felt the discomfort in adult gazes, like car headlights in your face at night. Leonardo sat outside her bedroom. He didn't knock, just leaned against the wood, not sure what to say. He had the strange urge to apologize, but didn't know for what. For being found? For existing? He fidgeted with the edge of his jacket. On the other side, Sofia listened to footsteps, the whispers. She was scared, but not just fear, there was shame too. Ashamed to be nothing in the eyes of the rich man, ashamed of being talked about, pointed at, discussed by journalists. Her messy hair, her thin, battered t-shirt, now news material. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about the girl in the photo. But nobody asked how she really was. Slivers of paparazzi light cut through the window when a neighbor accidentally left the curtain open. Leonardo was bothered. He drew them shut, dimmed some lamps. Truth was, he wanted to disappear, go back in time, vanish with the spreadsheets that always protected him. But that wasn't possible. He didn't sleep that first night under pressure. It was well past midnight, and you could still hear voices, as if the reporters would never go away. One of the building's security guards texted, warning them to avoid going out. Sofia had a nightmare and woke up gasping, calling for the lady who used to look after her before she died. Leonardo heard and went in slowly, but she crawled off to the far end of the bed, clutching a small pillow, silent. All this attention brought old memories back for Sofia, of how living on the street meant dealing with too many eyes. Those of the curious, those of dangerous men, those of the people who passed by pretending kids like her were invisible. Now it was another kind of gaze, but it hurt just the same. He tried speaking to her, left a glass of warm milk on the table with some bread, and sat beside her. The silence between them was loud. Every one of the girl's breaths was careful, like even breathing loud could call more attention. Leonardo turned to the window, feeling the squeeze, angry at himself for not knowing what to do. Money couldn't fix this, nor a contract, nor a simple click. Deep down, he was starting to understand why the word family was so heavy. It was different from any business deal, because it hurt in places no contract ever could. He looked at Sofia and thought of his sister, that startled look she'd had as a girl, those lost eyes, the kind of fear only someone abandoned can know. The next day, TV crews camped out at the lobby entrance. A reporter tried to sneak into the foyer, got stopped at reception, but not without shouting and commotion. Leonardo closed all the windows, forbade the housekeeper from going out, locked everything up tight. Out on the balcony, he saw Sofia hugging the stuffed dog someone had given her, the only thing that smelled remotely of safety. She whispered, "Will they go away?" with those eyes still ready to bolt. Leonardo tried to answer, but his voice disappeared. Instead, he sat down on the floor next to her, wordless. Sofia stared at the gate, scared, and Leonardo wondered how it was possible to be tough enough to survive the streets, and, all the same, so small before this mob of onlookers. And in that moment, under the awkward hush, he felt, maybe for the first time in years, the urge to protect someone, not for their name or for money, but simply because this child looked at him as if the whole world could come crashing down at any second. And he felt more human and more vulnerable than at any other time in his life. The ticking clock on the wall was louder than ever. Leonardo, sitting in a room cluttered with papers everywhere, tried to hear the silence left after the media storm. But there was no silence, no peace, just the constant buzz of ringing phones, reporters waiting outside, lawyers calling in nonstop. Every time the phone vibrated, Leonardo felt a rush of anxiety in his chest, almost like he was about to be run over. He looked out the window. Light rain, the street glistening, people hurrying along under umbrellas, but inside, time seemed stuck. Leonardo closed his eyes and took a deep breath, but when he reopened them, it all returned. Piles of files, notifications, official letters from people claiming to be the girl's family. His hands sometimes shook. He tried to steady them, but fear still crept in. Fear of making mistakes, of being fooled, of letting Sofia down. And worst of all, fear of leaving her alone, like the world had so often done with him. The honking outside mingles with the sound of a door slamming next to the office. Leonardo's lawyer comes in, looking serious, like someone who hasn't slept in days. He speaks quietly but straight to the point. "Leonardo, there's another group claiming to be Sofia's relatives. They've already filed paperwork. They're going to try for custody or child support, maybe both. And this woman, this supposed great-aunt, she's never shown up before. Only now." The lawyer tries to project some assurance, but even he doesn't quite believe what he's saying. Leonardo only hears half the words. With each mention of lawsuit, support, emergency petition, his eyes shift toward the hallway, where Sofia sits curled up, drawing something on a scrap of paper. She holds the pencil awkwardly, uncertain, but keeps going anyway. Her hair is messy, her borrowed clothes much too big, her gaze constantly alert to every footstep, every raised voice from the office. Eyes that already know trouble always shows up before happiness does. When she notices Leonardo watching her, she hides the paper like it's all the protection she's got. He feels the lump in his throat tighten. He should have this under control, should make everything easy. He's got money, lawyers. But this isn't a problem you solve like that. There are people trying to take away the little the girl has left, lawyers asking questions, reporters shouting outside. All she wants is peace, a warm bed, a breakfast that doesn't run out. Later, as they're trying to piece together what decisions they'll have to face in court, an email notification comes in. A summons, hearing scheduled, request for third-party custody, allegations of mistreatment, everything, all at once, out of nowhere. The lawyer says it's probably just strategy from these opportunists, trying to pressure and extort some money. Leonardo says nothing. He's known plenty of people like this, the scent of opportunity, and suddenly relatives come crawling out of the woodwork. But this time, the price is the girl's life. Leonardo starts to feel that old urge to give up, to run. It would be easier to walk away, let the legal system sort it out, go back behind the curtain where he's always hidden. But every time he thinks of letting go, Sofia's face appears in his mind, lying on the thin mattress in the tiny room they put together for her. He remembers that first night, when she didn't close her eyes until she knew he'd be sleeping on the other side of the door, so no one could come in and hurt her. That look of relief, that sigh. Leonardo feels it all at once, a mix of rage and love. Rage at the world, love at that girl's stubborn survival. As the rain thickens, streaming down the windows, Sofia curls up on the couch. Her eyes are red, but she won't cry in front of anyone. She just looks up at the ceiling, as if painting a different life onto it. She asks, quietly, almost whispering, if they're going to make her leave. Leonardo sits beside her, lays his hand over the blanket. He can't promise anything, but says he'll fight, even if it's only him. Sofia pretends to believe, clutching the blanket like it's a secret she's holding tight. The lawyer's visits become routine. Always well-dressed men, expensive briefcases, speaking in legal riddles. Sofia never understands, but she knows everyone's fighting over her, not for her. No one asks what she wants. Each visit, her eyes grow more distant, a little flicker of hope breaking each time. When they leave, she takes a deep breath, scared the next knock will be the one that takes her away. On the other side of the house, Leonardo pores over old papers without rest, looking for answers, anything that might shield the girl from this mess. He reviews reports, reads statements from distant relatives, everyone after a piece, a name, a check. Sometimes his head throbs. The lawyer warns, if you want to stop, there's still time. This could take years. It might all end up in court. But the lawyer's voice sounds far away. Outside, the press won't let up. A man yells Leonardo's name, fishing for a scandal. Another asks what he'll do if he loses custody. Leonardo feels his blood boil, wants to punch something. But then he looks again at Sofia and remembers what really matters. By the end of that day, as the house finally grows a little quieter, Leonardo stops by the makeshift room. She's asleep now. In the corner, hugging a battered old teddy bear someone from the staff brought her. The cover's nearly slipping off, her face calm, cheeks still marked by the cold, and that stubborn hope softening her features. Leonardo leans against the door and stands there, eyes stinging, thinking how easy it would be to give up. But abandoning Sofia, after all the people who already have, he can't even imagine it. That night, Leonardo couldn't sleep. He lay in his big bed, feather pillow, cold sheets, his thoughts spinning. Every sound of wind against the tall windows, every distant honk from the street, brought back the image of the girl looking at him, with those frightened eyes, half pain, half hope. It was deep into the night when he got up and went to the office. The thick carpet muffled his steps, but his heart pounded, wild, as if it might burst through his chest. The safe stood open, papers yellowed and files worn, the musty smell of old secrets. He breathed deep, as if that could explain the story of his life. Piles and piles of documents, contracts that didn't matter anymore, old declarations, family photos, everything out of place since he started digging into Sofia's past. But now, after all the legal chaos, the lawyers, threats, and phone calls from people looking for cash, inventing ties, he felt something new. A heavier weight, a desperate need to understand who this child was and what she really meant to him. That's when his hand caught on a grimy little notebook, hidden among old receipts and moldy letters. The cover, faded blue, had a stain in the corner. He nearly tossed it without looking, but for some reason, maybe just exhaustion, maybe just chance, he opened it. The first pages were smudged. Rushed handwriting, almost childlike. It was his sister's, Juliana. He'd recognized that handwriting blindfolded. Sense of childhood came back with it. The memory of her, laughing barefoot in the yard, shouting at him not to ruin her rag doll during their imaginary battles. Leonardo's chest tightened, as if there wasn't enough air in the huge, luxurious room. He sat down in the leather chair. His fingers trembled as he turned page after page, the heavy silence broken only by the slow ticking of the wall clock. In those lines, everything changed. His sister wrote, with fear and tenderness, about the tough years after she cut ties with the family. She wrote of friendships, secret loves, rash decisions. And suddenly, there it was. The name, Helena. Helena had been Juliana's best friend. But she'd been something more too. A confidant of secrets, a beacon of courage when life was falling apart. But Helena got pregnant, and then just vanished. Leonardo didn't know that. He'd never heard the story, never asked. A bitter anger rose in him, for never trying to understand, never being there for his sister in the years when she needed him most. Further on, Juliana's writing grew even shakier, more raw. If one day someone shows up, a little girl, maybe, quiet and alone. Look for her, Leo. Vasconcellos' blood might be out on the street, it might be suffering, but it doesn't deserve to be abandoned. Not after all that's happened. If she carries Helena's name, don't run. Take care of her, like you would have taken care of me, if you could. Leonardo froze. His eyes burned. The sound of the honking outside felt far away. The whole world shrank into that room that smelled of old memories. He kept reading, in silence, letting each word hit him. Helena and Juliana had promised to raise Sofia away from the Vasconcellos family, afraid of battles over inheritance, of prejudice, of old scars. They explained Helena had no one left. And when she fell ill, she'd made Juliana swear Sofia would never be left behind like they had been. The diary ended abruptly, maybe from fear, maybe by accident, with one final note. If Sofia exists, if she ever crosses your path, you'll know, Leo. Because it will hurt. Because it will bring all of it back. The air grew thick. Leonardo closed the diary slowly. His palms were sweaty, his soul in pieces. For a long time he sat there, staring out the window. Dawn already beginning to pale the rain-soaked sky. He heard nothing now but his own heart, aching, raw, almost childlike in its vulnerability. Below, the city was slowly coming alive. The gray clouds blended with the sound of life returning, bit by bit. He stayed there, looking at the diary's cover, thinking about Sofia holding her crumpled note, that look of someone who just wants a safe place, a name, a hug, any crumb of hope. And for the first time in years, Leonardo understood the true size of abandonment. How it aches to be forgotten. How a single word can change everything. How, deep down, he was just a lost child himself, battered by old feelings, hurt like Sofia, trying to make sense of what was left. Not knowing what to do, not knowing how to begin, he thought. She's my responsibility. My family. My blood. Slowly, Leonardo picked up his phone. Stared at his lawyer's contact, the shelter director, the doctor. All names that now meant nothing compared to what he'd learned that night. He looked again at the diary, breathing in the musty paper. And he made a promise, quietly, just for himself. I'm not running away. I won't make the same mistakes twice. The sun was beginning to fight through the drizzle at the window. Leonardo left the diary on the desk, took a deep breath, and for the first time in days, closed his eyes with no fear of what might be lurking in the pages of the past. The phone vibrated in the middle of a meeting, and Leonardo nearly ignored it, as he always did. He never interrupted negotiations, especially important ones, but that name on the screen, the public hospital, an unknown number, made time slow down around him. He answered standing, voice low, almost a whisper, and as he listened to each word, his face went pale. His head started spinning, a sour taste climbing his throat, and an overwhelming urge to run. He only managed to get out. I'm on my way. In his hurry, he left the room as it was. A few directors stared, one secretary called out, but he didn't answer. Heavy rain splattered the building's windows as Leonardo rushed outside, clutching his coat and ignoring the driver's umbrella. He slid trembling into the car. He wasn't sure if it was fear, cold, or anger at himself. Municipal hospital. Fast. The driver took one look at him, knew better than to ask questions. The traffic seemed especially cruel that morning. Cars at a standstill, honking echoing. A bitter impatience that didn't match the true urgency Leonardo felt. Out the window, he watched street vendors ducking under awnings, kids running on the sidewalk, and thought of Sofia. There she was, alone, at a public hospital. Her chest burning, eyes already sunken with fever. A fragile child, tossed into a world that had ripped away almost everything. Even her right to get sick in dignity. Arriving, he forgot any pretense. He hurried through slick corridors, his expensive cologne mixing with the sweat of panic. The antiseptic hospital smell stuck to him. Passers-by sat on floors, mothers clutching towels in their laps, staff rushing by, already drained. Leonardo clutched the slip of paper in his hand, gasping for breath. He passed a cluster of children in the corner. Kids really get to him now. And forced himself to keep walking, not to falter. The receptionist looked surprised when he gave Sofia's name in that commanding voice of someone used to demanding, never requesting. But this time, Leonardo was almost begging. "Please, I need to see my niece." She pointed without asking another question. He passed through the double doors, each step haunted by memories of his sister. Young, pale, so sick in her bed, blurring into his present fear. The room was small, dim, reeking of bitter medicine. From the window, all you could see was the gray, rain-soaked city. Sofia lay on the bed, the blanket too thin, her frail hand on her chest. Each cough filled the room with silence. Her whole body shook, as if every breath took a fight. He hovered at the doorway, torn between running to her and not daring to get that close. But finally, pain won out. He came over slowly, sat on the edge of the bed, gently held Sofia's cold hand. Inside, he was screaming. The fear was an ancient beast he thought he'd buried with his sister. But no, it was here, alive, clawing at his chest every time the girl coughed. He ran his thumb over her hand's back, trying to transfer some warmth, some comfort. For 1 second, he thought of everything he could lose in a matter of minutes. And this time it wasn't money, wasn't status. It was her. This small life, made of absence and grit, waiting for someone to tell her it's going to be okay. Sofia was so pale, skin shining with a cold sweat. Her eyes, sunken, still held a hope stronger than anything he could understand. When she realized it was Leonardo there, she tried to smile, but only coughed again, the sound cutting through him. He wanted to ask how she was, but couldn't bear to hear the answer. So he stayed silent, just holding her hand, listening to the machines in the background. Sometimes the nurse came in, adjusted a drip, shot stern glances, as if to say, without words, this is serious. All Leonardo could think was, he could buy the whole hospital, but not health, not time, not the relief Sofia needed. More than ever, he felt small, exposed. He flinched at the memory of all the pity he'd ever had for himself. It was nothing compared to what he felt for her. Sofia turned to look at him, eyes dense with meaning. It wasn't fear, it wasn't a plea, just a silent question. Are you staying? He squeezed her hand without realizing. A silent promise. He begged, in his mind, 1,000 times over, not to be too late. She wiped her face on her sleeve, fighting not to cry. She always tried to hold it in, swallow the sob, show more strength than she had. Leonardo saw it for what it was. She didn't want to worry anyone, didn't want to look weak. It's okay, kid, he murmured, his voice failing. His lips trembled, something he never let slip in public. He tried to smile, but only managed to close his eyes, letting guilt take over again. There, on that simple bed, he started to understand what every absence costs. How cowardly it is to pretend you can cut ties easily. You can't. And when she finally slept, her hand still clinging to his, Leonardo sat there, savoring every breath. An abandoned child, sick, but clinging to a hope not even the cruel world had been able to kill. And him, a man used to controlling everything, now helpless before an old fear, praying silently for another chance to set things right. Every time she stirred, he held his breath. Time, in that room, was different, so far away from the world of business and speeches. Just a hospital ward, a small hand, the scent of medicine, and that fragile hope, a hope stubborn enough not to vanish. The hospital's makeshift cafeteria buzzes with anxious voices, some waiting for test results, others for surgery, a shy cry here, an old radio blaring soccer far away. But it was outside, as dusk fell, that everything exploded. The parking lot's lights, harsh and cold, had been on since early, as if the whole hospital had become a stage. Just standing by the reception glass, you could feel the rising murmur, reporters shouting, cameras hunting for a face, microphones forcing their way past exhausted nurses. And Leonardo stood inside, catching his own reflection in the glass, suit wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes, somewhere between lost and broken. Someone from management had warned him. The press wanted to hear from him. They said it like it was obviously the right thing, but he barely heard. If it were up to him, he'd ignore the noise, head back to Sofia's room, spend a little longer watching her restless sleep, her red face, deep breaths in between the coughs. But looking out the window, he realized this wasn't about him anymore. It was about a fragile child in a hard hospital bed somewhere upstairs, in a city that now knew the word abandonment, but wanted to hear the word family. Stepping out the door, the night wind stripped away any scraps of vanity he might have had left. The crowd along the sidewalk pressed close, hoping to glimpse the millionaire, that usually stone-faced man, now with red eyes and a swollen nose from too many sleepless nights. Camera lights flickered endlessly, but the only thing he heard was his own footsteps, heavy on the pavement. A security guard tried to push the press back, but Leonardo waved him off, tired, almost begging to be left alone. Suddenly, silence fell. Spontaneous. Like a million microphones just switched off to listen. Leonardo cleared his throat, breathed deep. His fingers shook, but he didn't care. He looked older, worn, but it was there, right then, that he broke open. "I think you've all seen the story out there," he began, voice hoarse, searching for something to do with his hands. "You've shown her photo, seen the test results, speculated on everything. But nobody knows enough about what's missing." His throat burned. The security guard stood to the side, face full of helpless concern. The youngest reporter, holding a cheap recorder, stood in front, biting her lip, looking at him earnestly. Leonardo looked at her, and found he didn't know what, maybe a breath of courage. "That girl's in there, and I never imagined myself in this position. To be honest, I spent most of my life running from anything that reminded me of family. After I lost my sister, well, all that was left was work." Someone coughed. A car's headlight blinked far away. The scent of rain on hot asphalt drifted up, mixing with the crackling sweat of people yearning for drama. But Leonardo kept going. He dropped his head, stuffed his hand into his pocket, pulled out a tissue, and pressed it to his eyes. The face once hard as granite now wet, chin trembling in a way no one had seen. "I know a lot of people will think I don't know, that this is a stunt, that I'm being blackmailed. But none of that matters anymore. Because I've seen that girl. I saw in her eyes the same look my sister had, just before she left." His voice broke again. A few seconds of silence, only the growl of a motorcycle and a distant siren. He cleared his throat, lifted his face. You can see it in his eyes, the fear, but also something else, a strange relief, as though finally admitting the truth was his last escape. "I want to say to all of you, especially to her, in there, it doesn't matter what happened before. I don't care who doubts me, who criticizes, what it costs my image, my businesses. She's my family. Sofia Vasconcellos is my niece, and I'm not letting this child spend another day alone in the world." When he said her name out loud, some photographers even lowered their cameras, not thinking. It was as if hearing that, the way he claimed my niece, struck even those who'd never met her. A few homeless folks collecting leftovers in the square looked up and nodded, one of them whispering, "Now she's got someone." The silence came back, brief but weighty. Leonardo, hand to his face, cried honestly, without theatrics, no restraint, a real cry, the kind that comes after years of holding up the entire world alone. He just let it out. A nurse appeared in the doorway, watching from afar. Upstairs, an aide would later say that Sofia opened her eyes at that very moment, whispering if that man was still there. He was. And this time, he was staying. Leonardo pulled out his phone, ignored calls from partners, lawyers, people far too important to understand what was going on right then. He didn't care about the flashes. He walked back slowly, suit nearly dragging on the floor, feeling every tear like a fever breaking at last. "I'll take care of her. And if anyone wants to know, film, record, I don't care, just write this down. Sofia Vasconcellos isn't alone anymore. She's found her family. And I've found my chance to believe in hope again." That youngest reporter couldn't hold back tears. The old ones smiled out the corners of their mouths. Even those who'd come for gossip left changed. And so, In the middle of the night and all those cameras, a hardened businessman chose, in front of the world, to melt all the ice in his heart. All for a girl whose only wish, not long ago, was just to survive one more day under an open sky. Inside the hospital, the news spread fast. Nurses smiled. Tired doctors nodded at each other. And Sofia, with her wrinkled little note in her hand, dreamed a warm dream for the first time. The notary's office reeked of damp paper and old coffee. A light drizzle streaked the window in crooked lines. Sofia, perched on a plastic chair beside Leonardo, swung her feet in the air, nowhere near the floor. The security man in the corner scratched his mustache and glanced over now and then, but no one was really paying them any mind. It was as if, for that one moment, the whole world grew smaller inside those walls. Leonardo kept taking deep breaths, looking over the list of documents in his hand, doing the math silently. His fingers trembled faintly as he signed each paper with that weighty surname, Vasconcellos. But today, the name wasn't just a burden or a debt. It was a promise. The woman behind the counter called out, "Mr. Leonardo, I need your little one for a photo now." She called Sofia little one, so naturally, not realizing how much that single word could hurt and heal at the same time. Sofia looked at the floor first, then slowly at Leonardo, as if checking to see if it was really happening. He nodded, a bit shaky, and gave her a crooked little smile, the same one he wore when he had no idea what to do. Sofia stood, straightened her worn-out shirt, and shuffled over to the white wall. Twice, the woman asked her not to make a face, and the third time, at last, she managed to look up without dropping her eyes. It wasn't quite a smile, but it wasn't just fear anymore. Leonardo watched all that with a strange look, as if seeing a piece of himself, lighter, smaller, fitting inside an ID card. When the document was handed over, the name leaped off the paper, Sofia Vasconcellos. She took the new card in her sweaty hands, held it to her chest like a treasure. Outside, under his umbrella, Sofia walked along, trying to measure the weight of this new thing in her life. And Leonardo, for the first time in ages, talked less about work and more about the weather, about simple things. He asked if she wanted to stop for hot chocolate on the way home. She just nodded, almost smiling, and kept walking by his side. In the car, the silence was different from before. It didn't press down. It was the kind of silence where no one's being judged, just taking things in. Sofia watched everything through the window of the shops, the clouds, people rushing. Once in a while, she touched her ID in her pocket, as if afraid it would disappear. At the stoplight, Leonardo glanced over, noticing her hair, the way her hands moved. He thought of all the things he couldn't fix from the past, but there, right then, maybe it was possible to start again. He adjusted the heat, worried she might be cold, but didn't ask aloud. Just turned it up slowly. When they got home, that giant, empty house that had only ever been a backdrop for meetings, silence, and loneliness, Sofia stopped in the doorway. She didn't go in straight away. She stood there, looking at the carpets, the high walls. Scared of breaking something, scared of not belonging. Leonardo noticed. He'd felt that way too, even as the owner of everything. He knelt, stooped to her level, and said softly, "This is your home now too, Sofia." She bit her lip, looked up, struggling not to cry. She gripped the ID in her pocket. This was real, not a dream. Her eyes shone, and she tried to hide it, dropping her head. Later, already in the new room, Sofia sat on the bed, still wearing her battered shoes. Leonardo lingered at the door, unsure what to do. He thought about starting a conversation, but ended up just watching her. He saw her run her hand gently over the clean sheet, scented with lavender, and the soft pillow. It took her a long time to lie down. She looked at it all as if she couldn't quite believe it was meant for her. He turned off the light but left the door ajar. From the hallway, he listened to her breathing. Deep down, he was afraid things would go wrong, afraid she might run away in the middle of the night, of being rejected all over again. But something inside him had already started to change. The next day, they went to the supermarket together for the first time. A small thing in anyone else's life, but for Sofia, it was something new. She took in everything: the colorful fruit, the crowded aisles, the children running around. Leonardo let her pick out the cereal, the yogurt, even a box of cookies. She began to loosen up, quietly asking if she could take this or that kind of cookie. He laughed, realizing he was learning how to be a father on the fly. They came home with full bags. Sofia helped put everything away, organizing as best she could. She lost her fear of opening cupboards, started to feel like she could belong there. At night, when Leonardo came over to say goodnight, she froze for a moment. He hesitated, then slowly opened his arms. That's when, for the first time, Sofia took a small half-step forward and let her head rest against his chest. The hug was brief, awkward, but real. They didn't say anything. They just felt it. Leonardo stayed up most of the night, looking at Sofia's door left slightly open, listening to the gentle silence that had never filled that house before. He understood that responsibility isn't about fear or duty. It's about hope. And Sofia, already settled under new blankets, clutched her ID tightly, letting a genuine smile escape just before sleep. Outside, the city moved through its routine, but inside that house, two strangers were slowly learning how to be a family. Sofia walked down the wide corridor in tiny, careful steps, almost sidestepping as she went. There was so much house, so much quiet, and that old red rug made a huge noise for someone who'd grown up barefoot on cold cement. Leonardo followed behind, quietly, holding his breath. He'd never seen anyone scan so many corners of a room with just their eyes. Sofia wore her hair down, still a little unsure of herself, her face washed clean and a t-shirt much too big for her. She looked at the pictures on the walls, colorful photos of far-off places, distant beaches, people smiling, as if they were magic windows into a world she never knew existed. There, at the entrance to the dining room, everything felt a little out of place. The big round table was set just for two. Soup bowls, cloth napkins, shiny silverware, a steaming dish of rice and beans. The food smelled strong, almost sweet, and there was stewed chicken, the scent of garlic frying, a warm chocolate cake waiting on the sideboard, still in its pan. It was the opposite of what she'd known. There was no shouting, no clatter of pots hitting the floor, no chaos. Just a strange peace, a TV playing quietly alone in the next room, laughing to itself. Leonardo paused for a few seconds, waiting to see if she wanted to sit first. He noticed her hands, small and still stained from the drawings she'd made earlier, nails bitten down to the quick. Sofia pulled out the chair carefully, her shy face searching for confirmation that she could really sit down. Her eyes asked, "Is this really for me?" Leonardo just nodded, silent, smiling with one corner of his mouth, his eyes shining brighter than usual. When she sat, Sofia didn't reach for her plate right away. She looked at the food, smelled it without touching, as if checking to see if it was an illusion. Leonardo filled her plate without asking, gave her more rice than chicken, and remembered a story, he wasn't even sure it was true, about how kids who'd known scarcity only trusted in plenty after their third dinner. He didn't say any of this aloud, just remembered. She raised the first forkful slowly to her mouth. Really slowly. Even though she was tired, her eyes lit up with that first spoonful of hot beans. It was a pleasant shock. It didn't burn. It wasn't watery or charity. It was made right there, just for her. Sofia swallowed carefully and looked at Leonardo with a tiny smile, the kind that starts only on one side of the mouth. And he felt his throat tighten, his chest ache, because it had been years since anyone looked at him that way, as if thanking him for simply being nearby. Dinner wasn't quick, or full of lively conversation. It was mostly silence, but also the soft clink of silverware on plates, the TV laughing in the background, distant thunder outside. It was raining again in the city, and the wind rattled the house's tall windows. The smell of rain mingled with the food, and Sofia watched everything. She admired the neatly arranged knife and fork, the clean napkin, the droplets running down the glass, as if memorizing every detail so she wouldn't forget later. Now and then, Leonardo spoke a little. He asked if she wanted more chicken, if she liked the juice. Sofia just nodded, or answered softly. The fear of speaking up, of making a mistake, was greater than hunger. But at one point, she took a risk. She pointed at the cake on the sideboard and asked, very shyly, can I have some later?" Leonardo chuckled, eyes filling with tears, that choked-up laugh that comes only when your inner walls start to crack. He got up and cut a generous slice, placing the plate in front of her, as if it were a jewel. Sofia smelled it before taking a bite. For someone raised not knowing when the next meal would come, the smell was nearly as important as the taste. The cake was still warm, the chocolate melting, and her smile took over, wide and bright. She tried to say thank you, but only managed to look at Leonardo, eyes shining, mouth full. He couldn't take it. He ran his hand over his face, pretending to fix his hair, but really to hide the emotion. It had been years since that man had felt the house so alive. Everything seemed new, even the clock on the wall, which always seemed to tick too slowly. After dinner, the TV stayed on in the living room, its flashes of light dancing over the sofa. Sofia sat hugging a big pillow, listening to the sounds from the cooking channel and looking at the drawings she'd made with colored pencils on the table. Leonardo stood behind her, unsure what to do with his hands. He wanted to sit beside her but was afraid of rushing things. So he brought over a blanket, arranged it behind her back, gently asked if she was comfortable. Little by little, Sofia let her body relax, her eyes growing heavy, yawning before she even realized it. Night fell for good, one of those thick, warm nights, even with the rain. Leonardo led Sofia to the room hastily prepared for her. A made-up bed, a new stuffed animal, a colored lamp. She looked at everything like a visitor on a new planet. She wrapped herself in the blanket, curled up, her gaze still wary, bracing herself for a shock that never came. Leonardo paused at the door, watching the little girl settling in under the warm bedding, blinking slowly. She looked at him again, still unsure what to expect, and he just waved back, whispering, "Good night, Sofia." He hardly closed the door, stood there a bit longer, just to make sure it was real, the girl, resting peacefully, breathing deep, not afraid of who might come in. Something inside him broke open right then. His chest, always so tight, felt huge. His eyes grew damp, and now the silence in the house was beautiful. For the first time in many years, Leonardo felt hope spreading through the chilly rooms. There, in the darkness, he realized that maybe, just maybe, life was coming back into that house. And in her room, Sofia fell asleep peacefully, lulled only by the rain, knowing, at last, that the sun might rise differently tomorrow. The next morning, soft light crept through the tall window of Sofia's new room. The sun, shy, peeked through the gap in the beige curtain. Her room no longer smelled of damp and fear like other shelters. Now, it smelled of clean sheets, soap, a piece of bread left from breakfast. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, it was simply a comforting calm. Sofia woke, surprised by the weight of the blanket over her. She smiled quietly, as if embarrassed to feel happiness so soon. Outside, the house was still almost silent, but footsteps padded softly down the hallway. Leonardo, in his usual dark clothes, walked unhurried to the girl's room. He paused a moment at the door, breathing deep, running a hand through his gray hair at the side, as if he were heading into some important meeting. He held a steaming mug of coffee in his hand, thinking about all that had changed in such a short time. He knocked gently. Sofia startled, but quickly caught sight of his face, that serious expression, now softer, less daunting. She pulled the blanket up to her chin, just to feel again how warm it was, and smiled, not showing her teeth. Leonardo entered slowly, sat on the edge of the bed, a little awkward. He wasn't quite sure what to do with his hands, so he set the mug on the nightstand and rubbed his knee nervously. Sofia watched him, alert, waiting. She had a quiet fear of hearing it was all just a dream, that it would all end. But no. He took a deep breath, took her small hand in his. The touch was gentle, almost shaky after so long without showing tenderness to anyone. He held on tight, like grabbing a branch in a storm. He looked right into her eyes. Sofia's eyes were big, deep, the color of wet earth. His were red from exhaustion and emotion, but they didn't look away. "Sofia," he began, voice rough with nerves and bottled-up feeling. He stopped, searching for the words. She noticed, waited patiently, feeling the warmth of his hand. Leonardo swallowed hard, forced a smile, never his strong suit, but now it slipped out on its own. "I promise, really, never to leave you alone again. Never." The girl blinked hard, as if to keep from crying. She carried every word this man spoke deep in her heart. She thought about adults who'd promised before, promised to take her to the park, promised they'd come back, promised not to hurt her, and never kept a single one. But there, in that room smelling of new life, hearing that deep voice so close, some part of her believed. Leonardo pressed her hand tighter, as if that could glue their two lives together for good. "You're my family. Really. And now you have a home forever. With everything that means." In that moment, Sofia felt something she barely remembered the name for. Safety. It was as if she felt, yes, this must be it, home, coming in quietly, filling up space where before there was only emptiness, the sound of rain on a tin roof, the ache of hunger in her stomach. She closed her eyes for a second, just to keep that promise safe inside her. She raised her head, looked back at him. A different smile, one without fear, appeared. Her eyes sparkled, cheeks rosy as ripe fruit. She didn't say anything, because sometimes no words can measure what you're feeling. On the other side of the window, the street was beginning to wake up. A horn honked in the distance, a dog barked somewhere out of sight, the wind blew softly. In the room, everything that mattered fit inside those joined hands. Leonardo felt a strange relief, as if he'd finally rescued not just the girl, but also himself. The weight of years of silence and loneliness began to lift. Looking at Sofia, he realized there are ways to find hope again. That even after so long, even through so much loss, love can carve out room again. He breathed deep, as if wanting to keep the scent of the girl in that moment forever. Time seemed slower there, as if the rest of the world were on pause so the two of them could recognize themselves again as family. Sofia fidgeted with the hem of her pajamas, shy, but didn't let go of his hand. In her heart, she felt the urge to believe in tomorrow, as if life itself whispered, "This time, it's for real." Outside, the sun stretched bolder through the sky. A shaft of light reached through the window to light up their intertwined hands. For a moment, Leonardo closed his eyes and felt a knot tightening in his chest, not pain, not regret, something else. The urge to do things differently, to protect, to get it right. Finally, Sofia leaned her head on his shoulder. She said nothing she didn't have to. She simply wanted to stay right there, to feel she wasn't lost anymore. Her stomach didn't complain from hunger. Her fear had left, at least for today. She stayed still, listening to his breathing, and smiled for real. Leonardo moved gently, adjusted the blanket at her back, as if it were possible to shield her from the world that way. Whispered, barely audible, "I promise." No one doubted him then. Maybe, for the first time, hope and justice showed up together, as if they'd always belonged right there.